Listen to me very carefully, because what just happened in California is not a business story. It is not a political story. And it is absolutely not a story the people running that state want you paying attention to. A man was born broke in Echo Park, Los Angeles in 1944. He was a foster child. He slept in a parking lot at 22 years old with his toddler son on his lap. He borrowed $700 from his mother at 36 and built a hair care company from a tiny office with nothing but desperation and discipline. 45 years later, that company was worth $1.1 billion, employed hundreds of people, and sold its products in 30 countries on this earth. And on June 19, 2025, the state of California drove him straight into the arms of Texas. His name is John Paul DeJoria. And the governor of California, the man running for president in 2028, said absolutely nothing. That silence is going to cost you money. If you are watching this channel for the first time, I am OMER, and this is where I follow the money, so you do not have to guess where it is going. The information I am about to break down for you in this video would cost you thousands of dollars, sitting across from a financial analyst or a political consultant, and I am giving it to you completely free. The only thing I am asking in return is that you hit the subscribe button right now, because if you are the kind of person who wants to understand what is actually happening to the economy before it happens to your wallet, this channel is the only place you need to be. To understand why this story matters to every single person watching this video, regardless of what state you live in, you need to understand who John Paul DeJoria actually is, because the media is going to try to turn this into a simple left versus right argument, and I refuse to let you fall for that trap. DeJoria was not born into wealth. He was not handed a trust fund or a network or a leg up of any kind. He was born in Echo Park, Los Angeles. In 1944, the son of an Italian father and a Greek mother, both immigrants, both broke. By the time he was 2 years old, his parents had divorced, and the state had shipped him and his brother to a foster home in East Los Angeles. He came back at 9 and immediately went to work selling Christmas cards door to door to help his mother pay rent. He joined the Navy at 17 and served on the USS Hornet. At 22, his wife left him, took the car with, and he was sleeping in a parking lot with his toddler son on his lap. At 36, he was fired from his job at Redken over a strategy disagreement. He was broke. He was homeless again. And instead of blaming the system, instead of waiting for a government program to rescue him, he borrowed $700 from his mother and made the most consequential decision of his life. He partnered with a Scottish-American hairdresser named Paul Mitchel. They each put in $350, and they launched John Paul Mitchell Systems out of a tiny office in Los Angeles. They lived out of their cars during the early months. They launched with one shampoo and one conditioner, and by the late 1980s, Paul Mitchell products were on every salon shelf in America. Mitchell himself died of cancer in the early years of the company, and DeJoria carried the business forward alone for 4 decades, scaling it to $1.1 billion in revenue and distribution across 30 countries. This is not a billionaire who inherited his position. This is the American dream in its purest and most literal form. A foster child who built an empire with borrowed money and sheer refusal to quit. And California just pushed him out the door. On a sunny Thursday morning, June 19, 2025, in Austin, Texas, Governor Greg Abbott walked up to a podium and smiled. He told the assembled reporters that John Paul Mitchell Systems, the $1.1 billion hair care company that had been a fixture of Southern California for 45 years, was leaving California permanently. The headquarters was gone. The global distribution center was gone. The 80 new jobs that were supposed to be built in the Santa Clarita Valley, gone. Every single one of them going instead to Wilmer, Texas, a town of 6,000 people that most Americans have never heard of. sitting 20 minutes southeast of Dallas. To seal the deal, Texas wrote the company a check for $640,000 from the Texas Enterprise Fund, plus an $8,000 bonus for every veteran hired. Total capital investment coming into Texas, $12 million, plus a global product distribution infrastructure serving 30 countries. Abbott delivered his signature line, the one he has perfected from years of practice, welcoming California's corporate refugees, and the room cheered. Meanwhile, 3 states to the west, Governor Gavin Newsom, the Democratic frontrunner for the 2028 presidential nomination, the man whose policies have shaped California for the last 7 years, said exactly nothing. Not one tweet, not one press statement, not one acknowledgement that a company his state had hosted for nearly half a century just walked out of the room. And DeJoria's own statement was short, precise, and devastating in what it did not say. He thanked Greg Abbott and praised the Texas Enterprise Fund for enabling the company to build a major facility in Texas to serve domestic and global markets. No anger, no drama, no apology, just a man who had already made his peace with the decision long before he announced it, because John Paul DeJoria has personally lived in Austin, Texas for 25 years. The company leaving was not a sudden decision. It was the final formality of an exit that had been in motion for decades. Now, I need you to stop for a moment and look at the numbers, because this is where I do not care about your political affiliation. I do not care about your feelings. I care about your money and the numbers that California is producing, right? Now, should terrify every single person who has a dollar tied to this economy. California's corporate income tax sits at 8.84%, the highest rate west of the Mississippi River. Texas corporate income tax is 0. California's personal income tax tops out at 13.3% for high earners. Texas personal income tax is also 0. In October of 2025, California signed SB 53, a sweeping regulatory regime on artificial intelligence development that critics inside the technology industry openly stated would drive companies out of the state before the ink was dry. California has the highest gas prices in the country, the most aggressive environmental regulations in the western United States, and the longest permitting timelines of any state in the West. When a company like John Paul Mitchell Systems sits down and does the math on what it costs to operate in California versus what it costs to operate in Texas, the math wins every single time. But it is not just one company making this calculation. Chevron, which had been headquartered in California since 1879, 146 years, packed up and moved to Houston. Elon Musk relocated SpaceX and X to Texas. KFC announced a move to the Dallas area. NASDAQ opened a regional headquarters in Dallas, and according to data from Stanford's Hoover Institution using IRS migration records, California has hemorrhaged approximately $391 billion in adjusted gross income to lower tax states since the year 2000. California has lost approximately 200,000 residents since 2020, the first sustained population decline in the state's recorded history. U-Haul's annual one-way rental index has ranked California first in the country for outbound movers for 4 consecutive years. The state has lost 29 of its 40 oil refineries over the last few decades. Major insurance carriers are withdrawing from the market. Restaurants are closing. And according to California's own legislative analyst's office, the state is facing an $18 billion general fund deficit for the 2026 to 2027 fiscal year alone, with a structural deficit of approximately $35 billion projected to continue indefinitely. The numbers do not lie. They never have. They never will. And every one of those numbers is telling you the same thing. This is a structural collapse, dressed up as a policy disagreement. Here's what makes this story genuinely infuriating, and I need you to pay close attention because this is the part the media is going to bury. While John Paul Mitchell Systems was packing up its Century City headquarters in 2025, Governor Gavin Newsom's administration was simultaneously planning to spend $19 million of California taxpayer money on a marketing campaign whose sole purpose was to convince the rest of America that California's economy is doing just fine. Read those two numbers side by side one more time and let them register. California spent $19 million on a public relations campaign to deny the corporate exodus. Texas spent $640,000 in incentives to receive it. That is not a policy difference. That is a government in active denial about its own decline, and it is using your tax dollars to fund the denial. And when Newsom has been confronted publicly about the departure of major employers and residents from California, his answer has become a verbal reflex. He repeats that California is the fourth largest economy in the world, a $4.1 trillion engine of American economy growth, as though the size of the economy today has any bearing on the trajectory of the economy tomorrow. He told Fox Business the same thing. He told Bloomberg the same thing. He said he has been hearing this, quote, nonsense for half a century. This is the man who is now the betting favorite for the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination, which means his attention is not on fixing California's $35 billion annual structural deficit. His attention is on Iowa and New Hampshire and the Democratic primary voters he needs to court on a national stage. California is not his project anymore. California is his resume and the working families who built their lives inside that state. The marketing manager at JPMS in Century City who paid Los Angeles rent for 15 years maybe bought a modest house in Santa Clarita, whose wife is a nurse at a local hospital, whose kids have been in the same school since kindergarten. Those families are not a political consideration for a man planning a presidential campaign. They are a line item in a deficit report that his office would prefer you never read. I want to be precise here, and I want to be fair, because there is no clean hero in this story, and I refuse to manufacture one for the sake of a clean narrative. DeJoria's personally lived in Austin, Texas for 25 years before his company formally made the move. He was hedging for 2.5 decades while his headquarters remained in California, and California's workers kept his operation running. He accepted $640,000 in Texas Enterprise Fund money, taxpayer money, paid out of the pockets of ordinary Texans to subsidize a relocation that was already decided. And the 80 jobs that Texas is celebrating as new economic wins are not newly created jobs. They are transferred jobs. Positions that belong to Californians who held them, now reassigned to Texans who did not previously have them. Both governors are performing for their political bases. Both sides are protecting institutional interests, and the working people in the middle in California and in Texas are the ones absorbing the actual cost of both performances. Now I need to bring us home to your money, your financial future, and the decisions you need to be making right now, because this story is not just about California, and it is not just about one hair care company. It is about a pattern that is now running simultaneously in New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Minnesota. And it is accelerating. New York just funded a $30 million city-run grocery store while its billionaire grocer was walking out the front door. Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Minnesota are each running the same fiscal playbook. High corporate taxes, aggressive regulatory frameworks, structural deficits, and then political shock when their largest employers calculate that they can operate more profitably somewhere else. This is the pattern you need to understand as an investor and as someone who has money sitting somewhere right now. When a state's largest employers leave, the tax base shrinks. When the tax base shrinks, public services strain. When public services strain and costs continue to rise, the residents who can leave start leaving, which shrinks the tax base further, which creates more deficit, which requires more taxation of the remaining businesses and residents, which drives more exits. This is not a theory. This is a documented fiscal death spiral, and California is deep enough into it that their own budget analysts are projecting it will continue indefinitely. So what do you do with this information? You start thinking about where your money is deployed and whether the economic environment around it is stable or deteriorating. You stop assuming that the state or city where you built your financial life is going to remain the same economic environment it was when you made your decisions. You look at the companies in your investment portfolio and you ask honestly whether they are operating in jurisdictions that are becoming more competitive or less competitive over time. You look at the real estate you own or are considering buying, and you ask whether the tax and regulatory trajectory of that state is pointed toward growth or toward the kind of structural deficit that ends in either dramatic tax increases or dramatic service cuts, because one of those two things always happens when a government spends $35 billion more than it collects every single year without stopping. And most importantly, you stop being passive. The single greatest financial mistake that ordinary people make is treating economic and political developments as things that happen to other people, to companies, to billionaires, to politicians, rather than as forces that are directly reshaping the value of your labor, your savings, your real estate, and your investments in real time. DeJoria did not wait for California to fix itself. He watched the trajectory for 25 years, made his personal decision first, and then made his business decision when the math became undeniable. That is not disloyalty. That is financial intelligence. You are either paying attention to where the money is flowing, or you are going to be the last person holding assets in a jurisdiction that the money already left. Stop being a victim of information you had access to and chose to ignore. The receipts are public. The deficit numbers are published by California's own analysts. The migration data is tracked by the IRS. The one-way U-Haul index is updated every year. None of this is hidden. All of it is telling the same story. The only question is whether you are the kind of person who reads the story and adjusts your strategy, or the kind of person who waits until the damage is already done and then asks why nobody warned them. You are being warned right now. Let me close by asking you a direct question, and I want you to think about it seriously before you scroll away. A man who was a foster child, who slept in a parking lot, who borrowed $700 and built a $1.1 billion company over 45 years in the state where he was born and raised, that man decided California was no longer worth fighting for. Not because he hated California, not because he was politically motivated, because the numbers made the decision for him. And the governor of that state, the man running to be the most powerful political figure in the country, responded with total silence. So here's the question I am putting directly to you. Are you going to be a winner who looks at this story and asks what it tells you about where the economy is heading, what it tells you about where you should be deploying your capital, and what it tells you about the governments that are worth trusting with your future? Or are you going to be a loser who watches this video, feels vaguely outraged for 20 minutes, and then changes absolutely nothing about the way you think or the decisions you make? The money is moving. It has been moving for years. The data is public, the trajectory is clear, and the only people who will be financially damaged by what is happening are the ones who refuse to see it when it was right in front of them. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your answer in the comments below. Do you think California can actually reverse this? Or is Gavin Newsom simply managing the decline on his way to the White House? The receipts always tell the real story. I am OMER. Stay sharp.